Happy New Year 2020, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Carole. And Carole, thanks for joining us here on Facebook Live.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here to wish everyone a Happy New Year and to thank you all so very, very much for your dedication to the movement, for the idealism, for the power of it, for the belief in it. And as you can see, I have here the statue of Hippocrates, do no harm. That seems to be the theme that I'm using when I think of intactivist. Do no harm, and you're correcting the harm that is being done.
And you had something interesting to say about the purpose of art.
Yes, well, let's step back just a little bit. When Brother Kay and I used to wander through the mountains, we would do a lot of reading, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Kafka, and at one point he said, and I never forgot this, what is the social purpose of art? What could it mean? Is it just art for art's sake? Does it have a social meaning? And we found the meaning in intactivism. It's a type of public art. It is art, but it's public art. The demonstrations, the belief in idealism, the bloodstained men, the suits, it's art. And I'm proud and absolutely thrilled that this public art can move through America.
And Carole, you have the statue of Hippocrates here. I actually brought this to the Tosh show with me, and
yes, you did,
and showed it to a Tosh on air. They didn't use that segment, but the whole concept of do no harm.
Yes, well, we all know that in life there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of misery that none of us cause. It's simply caused by the fact of, by nature, by our diseases, our illnesses, death. But why should we as humans cause harm? So Hippocrates, so many centuries ago, said to the doctors, do no harm. And yet, it's not been followed.
It hasn't been followed.
No, it hasn't been followed.
I mentioned the Tosh show. Move Hippocrates out of the way there. I mentioned the Tosh show. I know that you and millions of other Americans who watch the Tosh show, and now it's also on the YouTube replay, the Gomco clamp. You saw how fascinated Daniel Tosh was with this evil device. I told him it's the among the most wicked inventions in human history, the Gomco clamp.
Yes, let me see it. Yes, when you actually look at it, when he first, ordered it and brought it home, it looks like a medieval torture device. I've done a lot of work on medieval art. I love art, and I don't love the torture devices, but I know of them, and this is definitely a torturous device. It's even frightening to look at, to think that a little infant just born, not very, very old, this will be used on them. On a baby.
Let me show our viewers. Some of you have probably seen it. I won't demonstrate the whole thing, but just to give you an idea, what happens is, let's say this is the baby's penis. The doctor rips open the foreskin with a tool. They insert a tool into the tip of the baby's penis, and they rip open the foreskin, and they peel it back. They peel it back like that, and then they put the head of the penis inside the bell of the Gomco clamp. I have not disassembled this. Well, actually, I will disassemble this. Carole, you may be able to help me the way Daniel.
I actually feel we're almost like in the 1500s again. These strange torture devices used to extract confessions from innocent people, and here we are now with an infant. It's actually just really disturbing. And it's also the reason why do no harm.
And so the doctor, they've already performed the single most excruciating pain that any human being will ever suffer when they rip the foreskin away from the head of the baby's penis. It's attached. It's a sealed structure. It's like the young girl child has a clitoral hood which is attached to the clitoris at birth, and only over time does that attaching membrane dissolve. But so they put the head of the penis goes in the bell, and then they pull. Carole, why don't you help me pull this foreskin up? This is where I needed Tosh's help to hold and display it at the same time.
Do I hold it?
This is what I have to do. Put the hold that.
Apparently, the
Hold
doctors
this.
feel
No,
this
hold
makes
this,
it more medical.
Hold the bell like that.
Where? Like this?
Like that, yeah.
Okay.
And let me pull the foreskin up over the bell here. If you can use your other hand to pull it over there. So the idea is to get it like that. Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, okay, so I'll take that then. All right, so you see, once they've got once they've cut the foreskin, they pull it onto the arm of the bell. So, and I showed you before, you saw how the head of the penis is actually. Let me turn this upside down and make sure that you get that shoved in there. The head of the penis is actually inside that bell. So once we insert it, so Carole, if you pull that foreskin through if you can you get a grip on that?
This?
Yeah, can you pull that through?
This is what Tosh did?
Yeah, there you go, there you go.
There we are. And then what?
Then, so you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the baby's foreskin, which is essentially just the skin of the penis. We call it the foreskin, but there's no differentiation between what we call the foreskin and the rest of the skin of the penis, except that generally the part of the penile skin system at the tip of the penis, which we call the foreskin, has the most specialized erogenous structures on the human body. And so most or all of it is cut off during circumcision. You can see this is we've started
Here we.
All right, so this has to get put this. And then this is the part where Tosh helped me. You got to get that, turn that. Okay, so, all right, I got that.
And now what happens?
All right, so you can see, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not an exaggeration. This is, and an interesting thing about the foreskin is that it's very elastic. So actually, I'm using a balloon to represent it. But the foreskin, like all the skin of the penis, which is how it can become erect and the skin doesn't break, the skin of the penis is hugely elastic. So actually, more elastic than this, well, you can see it actually. The foreskin actually is very stretchable on a baby too. The doctors can pull it out to an enormous length. So they tighten this.
Now, as they're tightening it, what's the child's?
Oh, the baby is either
affect?
Screaming in hysteria and, like I said, the greatest anguish of their life, or they have passed out.
See, we have a very bloodless demonstration here, but here you imagine the child. Oh, it's just horrifying to think of the screams. And yet the doctors and the nurses, now many of the nurses have said they've been very, very upset at this, but they see no way to intervene.
Oh, and it's interesting that you do
really
talk about the nurses being so upset.
Yes. We've heard from many nurses.
You asked me, what is the baby experiencing?
Yes.
Well, quite a few, if not most babies, go into shock at this point, and they fall silent. Sometimes their eyes are open, sometimes their eyes shut, but they have gone into shock, traumatic shock. And you mentioned the nurses. The nurses are ordered to tell the parents when they bring him back, he did fine. He didn't cry at all. He fell asleep during the circumcision.
And many nurses have told him online and emailing him that it's really, really traumatic for them. They have
For the nurses.
For the nurses. They have no way of dealing with it. They actually want to throw up. They feel so sickened by this.
And some refuse to do it.
And some do, but others are frightened for their jobs. They need the job. So, and this is the job. And it's the job to lie to the parents.
Goes with the job description.
To say that the baby was peaceful, the baby fell asleep, the baby's in shock. So already now we're deep into the torture chamber. Do you hear the cries? And then there's silence because of shock. Now what happens?
So they actually leave it clamped like this for 5 minutes to make sure that the blood vessels are sealed off and won't bleed. And then they take a scalpel and they just go around this whole bell and cut off the foreskin.
Circumcision.
Go around. I will put this aside now. And this, by the way, this contraption, which you can feel it in your hands, Carole, it's for that lies on a baby's lap, on his penis.
This is heavy. This is not light. This is heavy.
It's not like a feather. So
no, it's not. This is heavy.
If that baby is still conscious, some are, some aren't, they will hear and feel all of this. But this is what we're up against.
It is. It is. This is why I'm so proud of Intactivists for going out and doing something that's very difficult, wearing the bloodstained suit, and those who don't wear it come out anyway and hold the signs, always, even if they're not conscious of it, following do no harm. And it's amazing how difficult it is once something like circumcision has worked its way into the medical establishment to remove it. Why is it so difficult? Brother K, do you have any ideas on this?
I think that's a video for another time, Carole.
The answers are so complex. Part of it is habit. Once you accept something and normalize it, it becomes simply what you do. Part of it, I guess, has to do with the centuries of circumcision that have gone on and the effect of that. But you're right, it's for another time.
We are a traumatized nation.
Yes.
A
yes.
traumatized
yes.
people perpetuate the trauma because trauma is traumatic and no one wants to acknowledge it or deal with it. So it's easier just to sweep it under the rug. This horrible, crude, cruel, ancient penis sacrifice that we are inflicting on our babies and calling it medicine.
And yet there have been nurses and doctors who've come out against it very strongly. And there's always been an opposing force to stop this. And you, with all your activism and your appearances and your internet work and your support and your contributions, all of it together, making this resistance stronger and stronger. And this will be a fine year for resistance. It will. Now, when he went on the Tosh show, why don't you talk a little about that? Because that was a fine act of resistance to this act.
Well, the Tosh show, which I know many of you were worried about, and I shared your concerns. It was too great an opportunity to pass up, and it really worked out well. Daniel Tosh made certain statements during filming that indicated to me that he is, in fact, an intactivist. And I think the show that they put out demonstrated that. And someday I will tell the whole story of what Daniel Tosh and I talked about, but he made some statements during the filming that I don't want to share with you because they were not aired. So I would, as a journalist, take them as being off the record, but they would shock and outrage and horrify you. Some of the statements that he made. Carole, we first protested against circumcision in 1980. You and I started talking about circumcision in the early 70s. As the 70s progressed, I remember turning to you and saying, why is there no movement against circumcision? Our generation has protested everything. The war, civil rights, gay rights, women's rights. Why is there no movement, no protest movement against circumcision?
It seemed to be, to me, the answer was it was so deeply taboo to discuss it. To discuss anything about circumcision seemed to have gone into the taboo realm. It just couldn't be talked about.
How did it feel standing out there on the streets of Northern California in the state capital, Sacramento, California? How did it feel being out there, you and I alone?
Initially, very, very frightening. I have to say, I'd never been so frightened. I don't think he was frightened, but I was frightened. I just seemed so vulnerable, and because it was so new and so shocking, we got a lot of negativity. But then, amazingly enough, I remember a doctor came up and thanked us profusely for what we were doing. And gradually, over the days, more and more came up and thanked us, and I lost the fear. And once I lost the fear, I felt an enormous sense of power and change, something that is so exhilarating. And I know that all of you who've been out there will feel it. It's there. Social change is something that doesn't come to many at all, ever, ever. We live in a culture and we die in a culture. But here, if you can shift the culture to something better, there's nothing finer. I don't believe anything finer.
We don't have to be victims of history, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
We can be victors of history. We can conquer history and make it ourselves. And that's what we're doing. I call 2020 the year of the intactivist vision, when we let America see clearly with 2020 vision what circumcision is in all its gruesome barbarity and primitive cruelty. 2020, ladies and gentlemen, we are here on New Year's Eve. Tomorrow it will be a new year, 2020, and let's make the American people see once and for all, exactly with open and clear eyes, what circumcision is. An ancient penis sacrifice that American doctors have inflicted on our people by calling it medicine. And now they've confessed it was never medicine. So that's where we stand, ladies and gentlemen. Happy New Year. Carole, thank you for joining me here on Facebook Live.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. And may 2020 truly be the year of vision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great New Year. And see you tomorrow, January 1st, 2020, here on Facebook.